in the quiet heart of the African savanna. Surrounded by rolling golden hills and wide skies painted with the color of dawn, there lived a woman named Amina, whose spirit was as strong as the baobab tree that stood in the center of her village. In Juro, she was a widow, known for her kindness and the grace with which she carried her pain. But in a place where superstition ruled and hearts were easily swayed by fear, kindness was not always enough to shield one from cruelty. Amina had 3 children, Tendo, Masi, and Lulu, each with eyes full of wonder and dreams that reached beyond the horizon. Yet the villagers, trapped in their ignorance, called them cursed. They said the children had brought misfortune, that their father's departure and the drying river were proof of bad spirits hovering over Amina's family. They mocked them in whispers that carried on the wind, called them names behind their backs, and made the children feel like strangers in their own home. Every morning, Amina would wake before sunrise, her hands rough from years of work, and walk to the river with her children following behind her. She would carry heavy clay jugs on her head, and though her steps were slow, her resolve was unshaken. Along the path, when other women turned their faces away or murmured cruel words, Amina only smiled softly, whispering to her children, "Let their words fall like rain, for rain never harms the earth." Her children learned to hold their heads high, even as tears sometimes filled their eyes. The river, once the village's lifeline, had begun to fade, its laughter replaced by silence. The people blamed Amina again, saying her family had angered the gods. That night, when the moon rose high, Amina dreamed of an old woman dressed in flowing blue cloth who stood beside a tree that wept crystal tears. The woman's voice echoed like the rustle of leaves, saying, "To change the hearts of men, you must find the tree that weeps." Amina woke with her heart pounding, unsure of what the dream meant, but feeling its truth deep in her bones. The next morning, she told her eldest son Tendo about the vision. His eyes shone with courage as he said, "Mama, let us find it together." Amina hesitated, but she saw the same determination in his gaze that once lived in her husband's eyes. Packing millet cakes and a gourd of water, she wrapped her children in bright cloth and set out into the unknown. The journey would take them through deserts of doubt and forests of fear. But Amina knew she could not let the names they were called define who they were. She believed that somewhere, beyond the edge of the familiar, stood the weeping tree that held the power to wash away the cruelty of men and remind them of kindness once lost. And so, beneath the golden sun and whispering wind, Amina and her children began their journey, not just to find a tree, but to reclaim their dignity, their place in the world, and the forgotten truth that love and courage can silence even the harshest of names. The sun rose slowly over the wide plains as Amina and her children began their journey across the land, leaving behind the whispers of Njoro village and stepping into the vast wilderness that stretched before them like an endless sea of gold. The air was dry, carrying the scent of dust and hope together. And though their feet ached against the rough earth, their spirits did not waver. Tendo walked ahead, guiding his younger brother Mosey and little Lulu, who clutched her mother's hand tightly. The path was uncertain, sometimes winding through thorny bushes, sometimes vanishing altogether beneath drifting sands. But Amina believed the old woman in her dream had shown her a vision that could not lie. "We will find the tree that weeps," she whispered, her voice steady, even as the heat of the day burned against her skin. Along the way, they met people who looked at them with suspicion, muttering under their breath the same cruel names that had haunted them back home. Some even threw pebbles, calling them bringers of drought. Yet Amina never responded with anger. Instead, she would bow her head and say softly, "One day, you will see the truth." Her children did not understand her calmness, but they followed her example, learning that silence could be stronger than hate. Days turned into weeks. Their food grew scarce, and their water gourd became lighter each morning. One afternoon, as the sky shimmered like hot metal, Lulu stumbled and fell, her small hands scraping against the dry ground. Amina lifted her gently, pressing her close, and began to hum an old lullaby, one her mother used to sing during times of sorrow. The melody floated through the dry air like a blessing, and for a moment even the wind seemed to pause to listen. That night, as they camped beneath the stars, Tendo asked, "Mama, what if the tree does not exist?" Amina looked up at the heavens, where countless stars twinkled like the eyes of ancestors, and said, "Even if it does not, we will still have found ourselves." Her words stayed with them long after the fire went out. The next morning, they reached a strange place, a land where the soil turned red like the heart of the earth, and the wind carried a whisper of water. There stood an old man carving wooden figures beneath a dying acacia tree. His hair was silver, and his eyes were deep like a forgotten river. When he saw Amina and her children, he smiled faintly and said, "The world calls you cursed, yet you walk with light in your hearts. Why do you seek the tree that weeps?" Amina knelt before him and told him of her dream. The old man nodded slowly and said, "Beyond the Red Valley lies a forest untouched by time. In its center stands the tree you seek. But beware, before you can touch its roots, you must face the truth your heart fears most." His words sent a chill through Amina, but she thanked him with bowed head. As the sun set behind them, painting the sky in crimson and gold, Amina felt a tremor of both fear and faith. Her journey was no longer just about ending the names people called her children. It was about proving that love, courage, and faith could break the chains of any curse. As the red dust faded behind them and the sky turned from gold to deep indigo, Amina and her children entered the land the old man had spoken of, a place where silence had its own voice and the wind carried stories older than men. Before them stretched a great forest, ancient and endless, its trees standing tall like giants who had watched the world change 1,000 times. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of wet earth and secrets. Birds with feathers of emerald and gold flew above them, their cries echoing like forgotten songs. Amina paused at the forest's edge, her heart trembling with both awe and unease. "This is where the truth hides," she whispered. Tendo stepped forward bravely, pushing aside hanging vines as they entered the shadowed world. The deeper they went, the less light reached them. Strange whispers seemed to move through the leaves, calling their names in voices that sounded both kind and cruel. Mosey, clutching his small wooden flute, said, "Mama, I hear someone crying." Amina listened closely and realized it wasn't someone crying, it was the forest itself. The trees creaked and moaned softly, their roots trembling as if in pain. Remembering her dream, she said, "Perhaps this is why the old woman called it the tree that weeps. As they walked further, they came to a small clearing where a single pool of water shimmered beneath the moonlight. The pool reflected their faces, but something was strange in the reflection. Amina saw herself not as a mother, but as a frightened girl, carrying the same pain she thought she had left behind. Her children's reflections, too, looked different, older, sadder, burdened. Lulu began to cry softly, saying, "Mama, why do we look like this?" Amina knelt beside her and said gently, "Because the forest shows us what we hide." She realized then that this journey was not only about finding a magical tree, it was about healing the wounds of their hearts. She told her children to close their eyes and remember every cruel word they had ever heard, every name that had cut them deep. "Now," she said, "release them." Together, they whispered their pain into the wind. The forest seemed to sigh with them, its leaves trembling, and slowly, the reflection in the pool began to change. Their faces grew brighter, softer, filled with quiet strength. Just then, a deep rumble echoed through the trees. From the heart of the forest came a soft blue glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. Amina followed the light, and there it was, a massive ancient tree whose trunk shimmered with silver sap that fell like tears. Its roots dug deep into the earth, and every drop that touched the ground turned into a small flower. The sight was breathtaking. Amina fell to her knees, overwhelmed. She whispered, "The tree that weeps." As she touched its bark, the ground beneath her hummed softly, and for a moment she felt her pain dissolve. But the tree spoke through the wind, saying, "Before you heal others, you must forgive yourself." Amina's eyes filled with tears. She realized that all these years she had blamed herself for her husband leaving, for the villagers' cruelty, for her children's suffering. That night, under the glowing branches of the weeping tree, Amina wept for the first time, not in sorrow, but in release. And the forest listened. The night air around the weeping tree shimmered like liquid silver as Amina and her children sat beneath its vast branches, the glow from its tears lighting their faces like the dawn of a new world. For a long time, none of them spoke. Only the soft dripping of the glowing sap filled the silence. Amina's heart felt lighter than it had in years, yet somewhere, deep inside, a question still lingered. What did the tree mean by forgiving herself? As she pondered, a soft breeze swept through the forest, and suddenly the silver light brightened, wrapping around them like a living mist. Out of the light emerged the spirit of an old woman, the same one who had appeared in Amina's dream. Her skin shone like moonlight, and her eyes were ancient yet kind. "You have come far, Amina," the spirit said in a voice that was both wind and whisper. "But your journey is not yet over." Amina bowed her head and said, "I have found the tree, mother of the forest. Please tell me how to change the hearts of those who hate." The spirit's gaze softened as she replied, "The hearts of others cannot be changed until yours is free from guilt. You carry the weight of shame that does not belong to you, the shame of being left. The names they called your children were born from their own fear, not your sin. Forgive yourself, and you will break the curse that binds your village." Tears filled Amina's eyes, falling like rain upon the earth. Her children watched silently as she pressed her hand to the tree and whispered, "I forgive myself." The moment she spoke those words, the weeping tree released a great sigh, and its silver tears turned into pure crystal water that began to flow across the ground. spreading through the forest like veins of light. The sound was like laughter, soft, free, and endless. The forest, which had once felt heavy and sorrowful, now sang with life. Flowers bloomed in the darkness, and the air filled with the scent of renewal. The spirit smiled and said, "Now, take this water back to your people. When they drink from it, their hearts will remember compassion." With that, she touched Amina's forehead, leaving a mark shaped like a drop of light. Then she faded into the night air, leaving only the whisper of her blessing. Amina gathered the crystal water in her gourd, and when she turned to her children, she saw something different in their eyes: strength, peace, and pride. "Mama," said Tendo softly, "the tree does not weep anymore." Amina looked up and saw that it was true. The tree now stood still and radiant, its tears replaced by blossoms of pure white. "Because it has healed," Amina said, smiling, "and so have we." As dawn broke, painting the forest in gold and rose, the family began their journey home. For the first time, Amina did not fear the whispers or the stares that awaited them. She knew that even if the world still called her children names, those names would no longer hold power. The real magic, she realized, was not in the tree or its tears. It was in forgiveness, in love, and in the courage to walk through pain without letting it define who you are. The road back to Njoro was long, winding through lands now kissed by rain and wind that carried the scent of life renewed. Amina and her children walked barefoot across the earth that once burned their souls, but now it felt cool and soft beneath their feet. The gourd of crystal water shimmered in her hands, each drop glowing faintly, alive with the blessing of the weeping tree. As they journeyed, the sky began to change. Clouds gathered where once there had been none, and a gentle drizzle began to fall, the first rain the land had seen in many moons. Mosey lifted his face to the sky, laughing as the rain washed over him, and even little Lulu danced, her laughter echoing across the fields like music. Amina smiled through her tears. It was as if the heavens themselves had forgiven the earth. When they reached the village, the people stood silent, watching them approach. The same villagers who once turned their backs now stared with a mixture of awe and confusion. "It is Amina," someone whispered, "the woman cursed by the spirits." But as they drew nearer, the villagers saw the light that surrounded her, not a glow of fire, but of peace. Her clothes were torn, her feet were dusty, but her eyes carried the calm of mountains and the grace of flowing water. She stood in the village square, lifted the gourd, and said, "This is the gift of the forest. Drink and remember who you are." No one moved at first, until an old woman, frail and trembling, stepped forward. She had been one of the loudest voices mocking Amina's children. Now she knelt, her head bowed low, and said, "Forgive us." Amina's eyes softened as she poured a small stream of the water into the woman's hands. The moment it touched her skin, she gasped, for the ache in her body eased, and her eyes filled with tears, not of pain, but of release. One by one, others came forward, the men who had called her cursed, the women who had turned their faces away, the children who had thrown stones at hers. Amina gave them each a drop, and with every drop the air grew lighter, the hearts of the people warmer. Tendo, Mosey, and Lulu watched in silence as their mother healed the very ones who had hurt them. When the last person had come, a great wind swept through the village, bending the trees and lifting the dust like a dance of joy. The dry riverbed at the edge of Nioro began to stir, water bubbling up from the ground until it flowed once again, clear and bright. The people shouted in amazement, some falling to their knees in gratitude. "The curse is broken," they cried. But Amina only smiled and said, "There was never a curse, only fear." That night, the village celebrated, not with pride, but with humility. They lit fires, sang songs of forgiveness, and told stories of the woman whose courage had brought the rain. Amina watched her children laugh among the others, no longer the outcasts, but symbols of hope. As the stars filled the sky, she whispered a quiet prayer to the spirits of the forest. "May this light never fade." The wind answered with a gentle sigh, carrying her words beyond the hills. Days turned into weeks, and the once broken village of Njoro began to change in ways no one had ever imagined. The river sang again, fields turned green, and laughter returned to the huts that had long been silent. The people who once called Amina's children names now spoke their names with love and gratitude. They built a new well in the village and called it Maji Ya Mawanga, the water of light. Each morning, Amina would walk to the well, not as the woman people pitied, but as one they honored. Her children, once mocked as cursed, became symbols of strength and compassion. Tendo helped rebuild the village's broken homes. Mosi carved beautiful flutes that filled the evenings with music. And little Lulu taught other children the songs their mother had once sung to calm their fears. Peace had settled over Njoro like a soft blanket. But Amina knew that true healing came not only from water or miracles, it came from remembering the lesson the forest had given her. Forgiveness is the root from which all blessings grow. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, painting the sky in orange and crimson, Amina stood beneath the baobab tree that had watched her through all her trials. The wind whispered through its branches, and she thought she could hear the faint hum of the weeping tree far away, like a heartbeat carried by the earth itself. The spirit of the old woman appeared once more, faint and luminous. "You have done well, Amina," she said. "The world remembers the one who forgives. Your name will be spoken not with pity, but with honor." Amina bowed deeply, her eyes glistening. "Mother of the forest," she said softly, "it was not me alone. It was love that led us." The spirit smiled and replied, "Then let love guide your children to whereas the spirit faded into the last light of dusk. Amina felt peace unlike any she had ever known. The village gathered that night to celebrate the rains and to honor Amina and her children. Around the great fire, the elders told the story of the woman whose children were called names, and for the first time, everyone laughed and wept together. The same names that had once been spoken in cruelty were now sung in praise. Tendo the brave, they said. Mosi the wise. Lulu the pure of heart. And when they spoke Amina's name, they said, Amina, the woman who turned shame into light. As the drums beat and the stars blinked awake, Amina looked up at the night sky, her heart full. She whispered to her children, "Remember, my loves, no one can curse a heart that forgives." Her words became the final lesson of her journey, a truth that would echo through generations. Years later, when Amina had passed into the realm of the ancestors, the villagers still told her story under the same baobab tree. Mothers told their daughters about her courage, and fathers told their sons about her grace. And whenever the rains came after a long drought, the people would look to the horizon and say, Amina is smiling again, for her spirit lived on in every drop of water, every song of forgiveness, and every heart that learned to turn pain into love.